Welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review. Today I'm going to take a look at one of the most recent box set releases. That is of course the First Doctor Adventures Volume 2 starring David Bradley as the recast First Doctor, of course as seen in the most recent episode Twice Upon a Time and originally in the 50th anniversary docudrama An Adventure in Space and Time. This is the second volume of Adventures. Of course, previously at the back end of 2017 I did review the first volume of Two Adventures, so go and check out that review if you are interested about my thoughts and feelings on that release. Once again, this is pretty much exactly the same format, where we get a sci-fi episode and a pure historical episode, and they are both in the format of the Doctor Who Big Finish main range, monthly range format. So it is basically 4 25-minute episodes, stretching to around 2 hours long per release, and you do also get a bonus disc in there as well, with interviews with the cast and people that made it behind the scenes, including the writers and the producers and the sound designers and everything like that. So of course, as per usual, in the description below I will leave the link to go and buy this release from the Big Finish website. It's currently out now at the pre-order price of £23 for the physical CD and £20 for the download. However, I do believe at the end of September 2018 it will be going up to the recommended retail price where it's available in Amazon and other stores such as Forbidden Planet. For I do believe the physical CD will be £35 and the actual download version will be £25 to £30. And also, if you are interested by what I say in this review, of course check out the story details on the Big Finish website, along with the actual trailer that you can listen to and download as well. The first episode on this box set is The Invention of Death, written by John Dorney, and the second episode is the pure historical of the box set and is The Barbarians of the Samurai, written by Andrew Smith. So once again, exactly the same format to the previous box set, where you have a sci-fi and a pure historical, which is what I really like about these box sets. It definitely represents 60s Doctor Who incredibly well. The whole box set is produced by David Richardson, the script editor is Matt Fitton, and the executive producers are of course Jason Hay-Gallery and Nicholas Briggs, and the whole box set is directed by Nicholas Briggs once again. Of course, we do have David Bradley as the First Doctor that I recently met when I went to London Film and Comic Con, as you no doubt probably all know by now, and you will definitely hear many times over and over again over the next few videos, because as you can tell, I'm very excited about meeting all the different incarnations of the Doctor, and David Bradley was once again really good in this role. I think that I mentioned in the previous box set how he is almost a caricature of the First Doctor, and you do feel like a few lines here and there are a little bit staggered and kind of a little bit uncanny to an extent. You feel like it is the First Doctor, however at the same time it's almost not like him, it's almost another actor in the footsteps of him, because it is of course another actor in the footsteps. And I do think that David Bradley does a good job. However, I still think An Adventure in Space and Time is his main role as the First Doctor. I feel like he performed absolutely superbly in that role, and I feel like he plays almost William Hartnell playing the First Doctor a little bit better than actually playing the First Doctor himself. So once again, in this box set you did get a few of the traits in there, such as the and dear boy and all that, which no doubt would have been written into the script by the people that wrote for this box set, because they are naturally very used to writing for the different versions of the Doctor, so a lot of credit goes to them. However, at the same time, I feel like if you take out the fact that William Hartnell is meant to be the Doctor and the companions in this box set are also meant to be different people, you kind of feel like this is basically 60s Doctor Who reborn into almost a revival to some extent. So if you almost detach it from 60s Doctor Who and kind of have it in its own little bubble, I think it's a little bit better to listen to. Next up for the TARDIS team, once again we do have the trio for the TARDIS team for early 60s Doctor Who. So we do have Claudia Grant as Susan, and she does once again a very good job. She was in An Adventure in Space and Time, and she is definitely almost the whiny younger Time Lord sort of student that doesn't really know what's going on. She's a little bit helpless, gets sort of into situations and a little bit trapped, and yet she was fun to listen to in this box set. Once again, nothing completely big or stand out for her, which I think is almost very reminiscent to 60s Doctor Who. She wasn't exactly the main role, even though she was the Doctor's granddaughter. I always really seen Ian and Barbara as kind of more up there as the people that we are meant to relate to, because they are almost the people that we got introduced to the Doctor through their eyes and in their perspectives. Yes, Susan was good throughout this box set, especially in Barbarians of the Samurai. She in fact flies the TARDIS at the very later half of the story, which was rather interesting. I don't think that ever happened in 60s Doctor Who from what I can recall. So yeah, she was good throughout this box set. However, once again, no completely standout moments for me. Then we had Gemma Powell as Barbara Wright. Once again, she is a really interesting character. I think that especially in Barbarians of the Samurai, Andrew Smith does a really good job of incorporating in sort of her characteristics, the fact that she's a history teacher and the fact that she's done several essays on this time period period that they are visiting, how what was represented in the Great White Hurricane in the previous box set, where you have her almost telling the audience what is going on in this time period and the historical setting and kind of why they have landed in this area, and almost once again she's teaching the actual viewer about what is going on, which is really nice and once again very reminiscent of 60s Doctor Who. Finally, for the companions, we have Jamie Glover as Ian Chesterton. I think that he is the companion that I like the most throughout this box set. He does a very good job, once again a similar way to sort of disconnecting David Bradley from the role as Hartnell. If you kind of just bear in mind these are different people playing the roles and it is almost a revival, I think that it is easier to listen to, especially to the extent of Ian in these stories. He does very much play the macho male, of course, because the First Doctor is elderly and he can't do all the action sequences that the younger Doctors are known for doing in the later half, and he is very much the hero. There are several points throughout the series where he sort of comes in to save the different companions, especially in the first story as well. There is a little bit of development with that relationship between Ian and Barbara. Some of the stuff that I think would be fair to say we didn't really have reference too much within the actual TV show itself, but it is nice to see that Big Finish kind of developing that and maybe suggesting a few things here and there as well. And then I'm not going to go into any of the other people in this story, but we do have the extras in there, of course, who played the aliens in the first story, and then the Japanese people as well in the second story. But yeah, nothing really too stand out from those, but I do think that they played the roles very nicely. They did very much get introduced to the atmosphere of the story and really nicely supported the context of the episode. But yeah, I'm not really going to go into those to save time in this review, and I'm going to kick on to the first story first, being of course the Invention of Death, written by John Dorney. Now, The Invention of Death is in fact a rather unusual story. Basically, from what I understand, it provides context from that one-off line in Sarah Jane Adventures where Sarah Jane states, oh, Ian and Barbara haven't aged since the 80s or something like that, because this story sees the TARDIS team travel to this alien world, and it is pretty much your stereotypical 1960s Doctor Who story plot where the TARDIS gets into a little bit of trouble. The First Doctor wants to experiment with something because he is still a little bit unaware of how to control the TARDIS, to say the least, and basically they need to go to this alien planet to pick up the supplies that they need to fix the ship, and basically they get into a little bit of trouble on the way. And The Invention of Death is a very extraterrestrial episode because we are introduced to this species of alien that are essentially see-through, which I think this is a perfect example of a story that wouldn't have been able to happen in 60s Doctor Who, because I wouldn't have liked to be able to see what they would have done with the budget for this story, to be honest, or how they would have achieved the aliens in this nature. But they are a very unusual race. Because they are humanoid, you do still relate to them, and they are sort of at the same time a little bit similar to humans, but at the same time they are also very odd because they don't understand things that the humans say, such as in the episode Barbara introduces the idea of emotions to them and procreation in there as well, and also heartbreak and sadness, and they do not understand the idea because they are essentially a race of immortals, being this race that have popped out at the start of the universe essentially, and they do not need to reproduce in order to carry on, and basically they do not have the concept of death. So the whole idea of Ian and Barbara basically teaching this alien race very much what they are used to in real life to humans on Earth, sort of teaching students at Coal Hill, but they need to teach this alien race the concepts of essentially human nature and human life, and it is a very nice concept. I think that John Dorney has done a very good job of actually being able to incorporate in the style of 60s Doctor Who, sort of teaching essentially the viewer a little bit about human life as well at the same time, but also not completely focusing about that and still having the science fiction element in there as well. And I think that it's fair to say that this story is quite predictable, especially due to the title being The Invention of Death. Basically, the whole idea of this story is essentially a immortal race that is introduced to the idea of death, and then what happens when people in this immortal race start to die unexpectedly. And it is rather interesting. I think that John Dorney creates a rather interesting concept for this story, something that I've never really seen in Doctor Who before, but at the same time it's also quite samey to 60s Doctor Who. It also show that Dorney is in fact very good at keeping the taste and style of 60s Who, but also contributing something new at the same time. However, I do think that especially in the later half of this story, I think that it may have been nice to see the characters that we see go rogue maybe turn a little bit more evil, because I was expecting a bit more from this story that was a bit more ill-natured, but instead we have this alien that is kind of just thinking that she is doing sort of for the best, killing people for the best, to have seen what the humans can do in their short period of tiny little insignificant lives, and basically all the developments that they've had in science and chemistry, and she sort of sees the idea of, well, they die and they have this whole aim in life to kind of make something of their existence. So what happens when we apply this to our species? And then she ends up killing people of her own race by basically using some of the blood from Barbara. So yeah, it is rather interesting, but I did want to see something in this story where she kind of felt like she was being a bit more evil. Maybe she wasn't necessarily sort of too easily influenced by the Doctor at the very end of the story, where she realises that she's done wrong, she turns completely bad. That would have been quite interesting to see, because I think that this story is maybe resolved a little bit too easily. David Bradley performing as the first Doctor as well. I think that John Dorney has done a very good job of capturing that character, but also at the same time I think that Matt Fitton has done a very good job of editing the script to make sure that it is consistent throughout both this story and the next episode as well, being Barbarians of the Samurai. This episode kind of shows the first Doctor to be almost a little bit helpless, because he is like at the very start of his travels through space and time, and he doesn't really know how to resolve the situation, and he is a little bit confused about the idea. And to start with, Ian and Susan believe that the main reason why people are dying on this planet is because they've turned up, and that does seem the logical explanation. However, the Doctor seems a little bit against this, and I think that there is a few parts in this story where he does make a few wrong moves, which is quite interesting. We do get almost this amateur version of the Doctor kind of showing himself, as opposed to the guy that we know now in new series Doctor Who, being very much the sort of omnibenevolent and omnipotent kind of character that does absolutely everything right. Overall, for the Invention of Death, a really atmospheric story. I really love the concept of the planet of Ashdala and these people that are the species that are immortal, and then what happens if you introduce human nature to their lives. I think that that is a rather interesting idea. However, as I say, it would be nice to maybe see the script slightly changed at the end of this story, just to make it a little bit more of a challenge to resolve. Moving on to the second episode of the box set now, called Barbarians of the Samurai, which is written by Andrew Smith, and is the episode of the box set, naturally, much like in the previous box set, that I really did enjoy. I love the idea of Doctor Who going to a pure historical setting, as you've seen no doubt in the previous Big Finish reviews that I've done, and I'm so glad that the Big Finish have picked up the theme of doing one science fiction episode and one pure historical one, because it just makes sense. I think that 60s Doctor Who is perfect for the pure historical format, that more long-winded story, and you basically throw the Doctor and the TARDIS team into this historical situation, and the main threat of the episode is basically that period itself and the people that they encounter. And in this episode we have the 19th century version of Japan, which once again, much like in the previous box set, is an area of history that I'm not necessarily very well informed of. Basically, it's a little bit similar to Korea today. We have this whole idea of a country that is basically isolated itself, and nobody can come in, nobody can go out, and they have this whole idea of the samurai and these people that are in control, and then we have the peasants that are, of course, the more poor people who sort of just farm and do very substandard jobs. And the Doctor and the TARDIS team are thrown into this situation where they are, of course, Westerners. They are people that have invaded this country, and they are not allowed there, and you have the whole idea of the samurai basically trying to track them down throughout the episode, and they are very early on through into this story, and you see Barbara definitely taking the forefront because she knows exactly what's going on, because she's read up about this part in history. And I feel like, once again, tracking the episode The Great White Hurricane, I actually felt educated by the very end of this story. I think that Andrew Smith does a very good job to actually make sure that the viewer is informed, but also at the same time make an adventure out of it as well. And I love the way that the Doctor is also a part of this story, and I love the way that he sort of almost influences the people of this period and does involve a little bit of his culture in there as well. And he doesn't really understand why he is being called a barbarian or a Westerner, and he kind of shows a little bit more equality almost, maybe kind of the opinion of today's culture, but in this time that is very much outdated. And it is rather nice to see the Doctor flew into this situation that he kind of feels a little bit awkward around. And it is to note, once again, in this box set, we don't have any sexism, we don't have anything against females. Pretty much from what I understand, the majority of the race in the Invention of Death, the Ashdalans, are in fact mostly female. I think that we in fact had 2 females in the story that do essentially become a couple. So yeah, we wouldn't have seen that in 60s Doctor Who for obvious reasons, because of public opinion at that time in the TV and media. But yeah, I do think that, once again, it says a lot when we have episodes such as Twice Upon a Time, where they have these, for some reason, very sort of cliche, for some reason, crowbarred in remarks about sort of 60s culture. And then in these 4 adventures, the 2 in this box set and the 2 in the previous one, from what I can remember, have absolutely none of that. This is in fact the 2nd box set in a row where we have a rather adult theme, because I can recall in the previous box set we had the whole idea of abuse, from what I can recall, of being this relationship between these 2 people, and there is clearly an abuser in that situation. And then in this story we have the whole idea of basically females almost being these mistresses to the males in the samurai, and you have this whole idea of corruption and people from England coming over, being the superior race, and trying to organise kind of an alliance between the Japanese and giving them sort of more up-to-date weapons as opposed to spears and their very 18th century weaponry that they have. And yeah, it is a rather unusual story, but as I say, at the same time, I feel very much educated by this one, because it's definitely a fun atmosphere, once again, and something of which that I had absolutely zero knowledge of before. So yeah, I'm happy that I listened to this one, and I'm happy that we once again get another pure historical to enjoy. But naturally, because this is a pure historical, I feel like not everybody will like this one, because I know that pure historicals are not exactly frowned upon by some people, but not necessarily liked by some people. Some see them as boring, so it is all down to personal perception. If you like pure historical episodes, and no doubt you will very much key with this one very nicely and you will get along with it. However, if you're somebody that prefers the science fiction episodes, then maybe you won't like this one. So I guess for the next box set in volume 3, it might be nice to have a historical themed story, however, one of which that has a science fiction element in there as well. Maybe seeing the Doctor travel to 20th century Earth or something like that, or maybe the 90s or something. The First Doctor interact with actual modern day technology, because I would love the idea of basically seeing the First Doctor trying to use an iPhone or something like that. That would be quite cool. Maybe a political story or something like that. So yeah, I think that a historical but with a science fiction twist is very much required in this series at some point in the future. So overall, for the First Doctor Adventures Volume 2, I think that this box set, much like the first one, is a very interesting listen. I feel like this one may have got a lot of interest from the new series viewers due to the main protagonist being David Bradley as opposed to William Hartnell, and it is nice to see once again 60s Doctor Who actually in the full cast audio drama format, because as I mentioned in the previous review, I'm not one that necessarily can get along with the early Adventures format of having the narration interrupt the actual story every so often. I feel like it brings out of the episode a little bit and kind of makes me feel a little bit detached from the episode, which is something that doesn't really happen with the full cast episodes. However, at the same time, I still feel that these 2 episodes are quite predictable, very much of the style of 60s Doctor Who, and it would have been nice to maybe see a few more challenges through into the first story, but I still think that John Dorney and Andrew Smith have done a very good job of writing these episodes. I also think that the cast have done a very good job of portraying the characters, if you kind of forget that they are replacing other people that originally played the role. And also, I think that Matt Fitton did a very good job of script editing as well. I imagine that he would have had a very big role of making sure that it is consistent as the First Doctor and making sure that it sounds like him, which I think that David Bradley, as I said, does do a very good job. And my only main criticisms, I think, from the listening perspective, is a flaw that is similar to the first box set as well, due to this being a monthly range style story of around 2 hours long per episode. It may be a little bit long-winded for the new series listener. However, if you are a new series listener and are looking to get into Big Finish and looking for an area to jump on with, and you are willing to give this box set a go, then I definitely recommend it. I think that definitely expose yourself to classic series Doctor Who. It is definitely well worth a listen, because it is a great atmospheric box set, as I said. And why not jump on with David Bradley as the First Doctor, as I feel like he may be a little bit more at ease than the First Doctor, maybe within the TV show, and certainly more so than the early adventures on Big Finish that is kind of the companion series to this one. So yeah, a good box set, one of which that I recommend to the experienced Big Finish listener, but also the new series listeners as well. But it would be nice to maybe have a few more experimental episodes in there, maybe a few more Black Mirror-esque ones that kind of throw the rule book out of the window a little bit and do something that 60s Doctor Who is necessarily not known for, and that is the unpredictability of the storyline. Yeah, that's that for this review. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions about this release or the First Doctor adventures as a whole, then please do leave them in the description below, and I will reply to them at some point in the near future. And I guess I will see you all in more Doctor Who reviews at some point in the near future, and also some more Doctor Who audio drama reviews as well. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.